First Contact Revelations. Grand Arbiter Vexthor's crystalline form shimmered with anticipation as the Galactic Security Council chamber filled with representatives from across known space. The emergency session had been called following a disturbing report from the Examination Corps, and the tension in the room was palpable. Esteemed colleagues, Vexthor's resonant voice filled the chamber. We are here to discuss the findings of senior researcher Nix, for 27 regarding the species known as humans. Researcher, you have the floor. The spindly, multi-limbed form of Nix, for 27 glided to the center platform, neural tendrils writhing with barely contained excitement. The veteran xenoanthropologist had spent decades studying various species, but nothing had prepared them for their latest discovery. Distinguished members of the council, Nix, for 27 began, activating the holographic display. What I am about to share will fundamentally change our understanding of combat capability in the galaxy. For centuries, we have ranked species based on natural weapons, technological advancement, and theoretical military potential. Today, I must inform you that we have been using the wrong metrics entirely. The chamber erupted in murmurs as Nix, for 27 displayed footage from various human conflicts. Observe, they continued, these beings, whom we initially dismissed as fragile and primitive, have turned their very weaknesses into unprecedented advantages. The footage showed humans fighting in environments that should have been lethal, continuing despite injuries that would have incapacitated most species, and adapting to situations with frightening speed. Admiral Zyxtar of the Hegemony Defense Force rose from his gravity cushion, his metallic scales reflecting the chamber's lights. Impossible. Our analysis showed they lack natural armor, possess no significant biological weapons, and their physical strength is merely average. Precisely, Nix, for 27 replied, mandibles clicking with enthusiasm. That's what makes them extraordinary. Every disadvantage forced them to innovate. Their soft skin meant they learned to craft armor from any available material. Their limited strength led them to develop leverage-based combat techniques. Their susceptibility to injury drove them to create medical technologies that can keep them fighting long past their natural limits. The holographic display shifted to show human combat training. But here's the truly fascinating part, they deliberately practice warfare. Not just their warriors, their entire species regularly engages in activities they call sports and martial arts, which are essentially ritualized combat training disguised as entertainment. The chief strategist of the Hive Collective, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, pulsed with concern. You mean to tell us they voluntarily engage in combat-like activities, for pleasure? Indeed, Nix, for 27 confirmed, and that's just the beginning. Humans have developed something they call spite, the ability to continue fighting even when victory is impossible, simply to impose cost upon their enemy. They have turned psychological warfare into an art form, using humor and unpredictability as weapons. The display showed footage of a human outpost defending against a swarm incursion. Despite being hopelessly outnumbered, the humans had not only held their ground but had somehow convinced half the swarm that their position was protected by something called a meme shield. The swarm units actually stopped attacking because they couldn't determine if the humans were serious or insane, Nix, for 27 explained. This psychological uncertainty is a weapon humans wield with devastating effectiveness. Grand Arbiter Vexthor's crystalline form dulled with concern. Are you suggesting we should consider them a threat? I am suggesting, Nix, for 27 responded carefully, that we should consider them the most formidable potential allies, or adversaries, in known space. Their combination of adaptability, psychological warfare, and what they call creative problem-solving, makes them unique among all known species. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. A species that turned its weaknesses into strengths, that treated combat as entertainment, that could continue fighting through injuries that would kill most beings, and that had mastered the art of psychological warfare, all while maintaining a sense of humor about it. There's one more thing, Nix, for 27 added, their neural tendrils twisting with what might have been amusement. They have a saying, hold my beer. When a human uses this phrase, it typically precedes an action that defies all logical risk assessment and yet, somehow, often succeeds. The Security Council chambers erupted in chaos as the implications became clear. The galaxy's deadliest warriors weren't the species with the strongest natural weapons or the most advanced technology, they were the ones who had turned their very evolution into a combat advantage, who had made warfare into an art form, and who approached battle with both scientific precision and creative chaos. The humans had not become the deadliest warriors in the galaxy despite their weaknesses, they had become deadly because of them. And that, perhaps, was the most terrifying revelation of all. The Persistence Protocol. The Kraxan Imperial fleet had made many miscalculations in their thousand-year history of conquest, but none quite as catastrophic as underestimating human persistence. Fleet Commander Raxvas stood on the bridge of his flagship, his exoskeleton clicking nervously as he reviewed the battle footage. The invasion of the human colony on Proxima B should have been simple: disable their advanced technology, overwhelm their defenses, and claim the resource-rich planet for the Empire. Instead, it had become a cautionary tale that would be studied for generations. "Play the tactical analysis again," he ordered, his secondary hearts thrumming with anxiety. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the initial stages of what would become known as the Proxima incident. The Kraxan's electromagnetic pulse had worked perfectly, disabling the colony's advanced defense systems, communications, and most of their powered equipment. By all logical analysis, the humans should have surrendered immediately. Instead, they had adapted in ways that defied conventional military doctrine. "Lieutenant Sixtral," Raxvas addressed his tactical officer, "explain to our new recruits exactly what happened next." The lieutenant's sensory frills flattened against their head in remembered embarrassment. The humans immediately reverted to what they called analog warfare. They used primitive chemical-propelled weapons, mechanical tools, and something particularly horrifying called guerrilla tactics. The display showed human defenders using their environment in unprecedented ways. They had turned mining equipment into makeshift artillery, transformed agricultural machinery into armored vehicles, and somehow weaponized the local wildlife. But it was their psychological warfare that had truly broken the Kraxans' will to fight. "They started naming things," Lieutenant Sixtral continued, mandibles twitching. "They named their improvised weapons after ancient Earth deities. They painted faces on their machines. They broadcast what they called music during attacks, primitive rhythmic sounds that they claimed improved their combat efficiency but seemed designed primarily to unnerve our troops." The footage showed a particularly devastating battle where humans had used the colony's maintenance tunnels to outflank the Kraxan forces. They had emerged from underground passages singing something called "Fortunate Son," their primitive weapons decorated with smiling faces and phrases like "boomstick" and "problem solver." "But surely," interrupted a fresh recruit, "once they ran out of ammunition for their chemical weapons." "They made more," Raxvas cut in. "Using century-old techniques and local materials. When we adapted our shields to block their projectiles, they switched to something called Molotov cocktails. When we deployed energy shields, they found ways to overload them using the mining colony's industrial equipment." The display shifted to show the turning point of the conflict, what the humans had dubbed Operation Wasp Nest. They had reprogrammed the colony's maintenance drones using mechanical switches and basic programming, creating what they called a retrotech swarm. The drones, operating on simple but effective algorithms, had proved immune to the Kraxans' electronic warfare. The humans had contingency plans for their contingency plans, Lieutenant Sixtral explained. They called it Murphy's Law, their belief that anything that can go wrong, will go wrong. So they prepared for everything to go wrong and somehow turned that paranoia into a tactical advantage. Raxvas moved to the center of the bridge, his exoskeleton now a pale shade of defeat. But the most devastating aspect wasn't their improvised weapons or tactics. It was their sheer, irrational persistence. When we intercepted their communications, we discovered they were treating the whole invasion as something they called a challenge run. The final footage showed human defenders discussing strategies as if they were playing some sort of game, complete with scoring systems for creative solutions and what they termed achievement unlocks for particularly effective tactics. They turned their desperate survival into a competition among themselves, Raxvos continued. They awarded points for innovative kills, created leaderboards for successful ambushes, and celebrated particularly creative solutions with improvised ceremonies. They were enjoying themselves. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Kraxan Empire had not just been defeated, they had become part of a human game, their sophisticated military doctrine rendered meaningless by opponents who treated warfare as a creative exercise in problem-solving. The final insult, Lieutenant Zixtral added, came when they broadcast their victory celebration. They had created something called a speedrun leaderboard for repelling invasions. Our defeat wasn't just recorded as a military victory, it was logged as the current record holder for any % alien invasion defense, glitchless category. Fleet Commander Raxvos turned to face his crew, his exoskeleton now the deep blue of serious instruction. Remember this lesson well. Humans don't just persist, they thrive on adversity. They don't just adapt, they turn adaptation itself into a form of recreation. And most importantly, they don't just survive, they find ways to enjoy the very process of survival. The Proxima incident had taught the galaxy a valuable lesson: removing humanity's technological advantages didn't weaken them, it merely challenged them to become more creative. And if there was one thing more dangerous than a technologically advanced human, it was a human forced to improvise. The psychology of war. High Archon Telera of the Collective Mind Directorate stared at the bewildering data streams flooding her neural interface. After 3 stellar cycles of studying human combat psychology, her research team had reached a startling conclusion: humans didn't just fight wars, they waged them with their minds. Review recording Delta 7, she commanded, her crystalline form pulsing with frustrated curiosity. The quantum display materialized, showing footage from the infamous Europa Defense Initiative. Captain Isabella Rodriguez stood at the command center of Outpost Europa, facing down an overwhelming force of hive-mind bioships. With all advanced weapons disabled and communications cut off, conventional military doctrine would have called for immediate surrender. Instead, she smiled. "Let's show them why humans love impossible odds," she had said, initiating what would become known as the Europa Gambit. "Pause recording," Telera ordered. Analysis. Her chief psychological warfare expert, Unit 773, stepped forward. The subject displays what humans call defiant joy, a psychological state where the worse their tactical situation becomes, the more they appear to enjoy the challenge. The recording continued, showing how Rodriguez and her crew had turned the freezing conditions of Europa to their advantage. They had deliberately vented their base's atmosphere, letting the moon's extreme cold freeze the organic components of the hive mind's bioships. But it was their psychological warfare that had truly devastated their opponents. They broadcast what they called memes across all frequencies, Unit 773 explained. Images and phrases designed to confuse and demoralize. They turned the hive mind's tactical communications into what they termed a comment section. The collective consciousness of the enemy fleet became fragmented, trying to understand concepts like trolling and rickrolling. Telera's crystalline form flickered with disbelief. They weaponized humor. More than that, another analyst chimed in. They weaponized their entire emotional spectrum. When the hive mind attempted psychological warfare, projecting fear and despair, the humans responded with something they called gallows humor. They made jokes about their possible demise, turning existential dread into a form of morale boost. The display showed how Rodriguez's crew had named their emergency protocols after ancient Earth entertainment references. The more desperate their situation became, the more elaborate their humor grew. They had even created impromptu awards for the most creative solutions to their survival challenges. But here's the most fascinating aspect, Unit 773 continued. They exhibit a psychological trait we've termed collective competitive adaptation. When one human develops a successful strategy, others don't just copy it, they try to improve upon it. They turn survival itself into a form of competition. The recording showed how the Europa defenders had established what they called a speedrunning strat for repairing critical systems under fire. Teams competed to find faster, more efficient methods, sharing their techniques through something they termed pro-gamer moves. Their psychological resilience extends beyond mere survival, Tellera observed. They actively seek ways to dominate and control seemingly uncontrollable situations. But how do they maintain such psychological cohesion under extreme stress? The answer came from another battle recording, this time from the Mars perimeter defense. A squad of human defenders, trapped behind enemy lines, had started singing. Not battle hymns or war cries, but something they called pop music. They coordinated their counterattacks to the rhythm, used lyrics as code phrases, and somehow maintained group morale through shared cultural references. They've developed something we call the humanity factor, Unit 773 explained. When faced with overwhelming odds, they don't just fight harder, they fight smarter, using their psychological quirks as tactical advantages. They turn fear into focus, stress into strength, and impossible situations into what they call achievement hunting opportunities. Tellera's form pulsed with realization. They're not just warriors, they're psychological architects. Each battle becomes a story they're writing, each impossible situation a challenge they're solving. They don't just want to win, they want to win memorably. The final footage showed Rodriguez's crew celebrating their victory by creating what they called Europa Defense Any% speedrun world record. They had turned their desperate battle for survival into a performance art, complete with commentary and highlight reels. Most species fight wars out of necessity, Tellera concluded, her crystalline structure resonating with newfound understanding. Humans fight them with style. They don't just defeat their enemies, they become legends in the process. And perhaps that's the most powerful psychological weapon of all, the ability to turn warfare itself into a form of self-expression. As the recording ended, the research team added a new classification to their combat psychology database. Under most dangerous combat traits, they listed human creativity, the ability to turn psychological warfare into performance art while maintaining tactical efficiency. The galaxy had learned yet another lesson about humanity: their most powerful weapons weren't their guns or ships or strategies. Their most powerful weapons were their minds, complex, creative, and capable of turning anything, even warfare itself, into an art form. Evolution's champions. Supreme biologist Kirax floated in his suspension chamber aboard the science vessel Evolution's Eye, surrounded by holographic displays of human biological data. After the recent series of human military successes, the Galactic Science Council had tasked him with understanding how such a seemingly ordinary species had become the galaxy's apex warriors. Begin recording, Analysis Report 2187, Human Evolutionary Advantages. Kirax's tentacles danced across the neural interface. What we initially dismissed as evolutionary disadvantages are, in fact, the foundation of humanity's combat superiority. The main display showed a three-dimensional map of Earth's diverse environments. Their homeworld is a death trap, Kirax continued. Multiple climate zones, varying gravity conditions due to topographical differences, atmospheric pressure variations, and extreme temperature fluctuations. Most species would have evolved to survive in one specific niche. Humans. They adapted to all of them. His assistant, research director Ixil, pulled up footage of human activities across Earth's environments. They swim in freezing waters for recreation, climb mountains with minimal protection, and willingly inhabit regions that experience regular natural disasters. They call it extreme sports, deliberately seeking out harsh conditions for entertainment. But that's just the beginning, Kirax's voice resonated with excitement. Look at their cellular structure. The display zoomed in to show human tissue samples. Their bodies are constantly at war with themselves. Their immune system is so aggressive it sometimes attacks their own tissues. They've evolved repair mechanisms that work while they're still fighting. The holographic display shifted to show human healing factors. Most species enter a healing stasis when damaged. Humans. They developed a system that lets them continue functioning while repairs are underway. They call it walking it off, a remarkably efficient adaptation that turns ongoing damage into a survivable inconvenience. Footage played of a human soldier continuing to fight despite what should have been incapacitating injuries. Their pain response is particularly fascinating, Ixel noted. They can consciously override it. What's more, they've developed cultural practices that deliberately push these limits. They call it training, systematically damaging their muscles to make them stronger. Their endurance capabilities are equally remarkable, Kirax added, bringing up comparison charts. Most predator species evolved for short, powerful bursts of activity. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. They can maintain moderate physical activity for extraordinary periods, literally chasing prey until it collapses from exhaustion. The display showed human distance runners, marathon events, and ultra-endurance competitions. They turned this evolutionary trait into something they call endurance sports, Ixel observed. They compete to see who can push their limits the furthest. It's like they're trying to exceed their own evolutionary boundaries. But here's what makes them truly unique, Kirax's tentacles waved excitedly. Their adaptability isn't just physical, it's encoded into their very psychology. When faced with environmental challenges, they don't just survive them, they find ways to thrive in them. The holographic display showed humans living in environments that should have been lethal, Arctic research stations, underwater habitats, high-altitude settlements. Other species avoid hostile environments, Kirax noted. Humans see them as challenges to overcome. They call it pushing the envelope, continuously testing and expanding their capabilities. Their reproductive strategy is equally impressive, Ixel added. Most species optimize for either quantity or quality of offspring. Humans. They optimized for adaptability. Their genetic diversity is astounding, allowing for rapid adaptation to new conditions within a few generations. Kirax moved to the center of his suspension chamber, his bioluminescence pulsing with revelation. And they've turned all of this, their environmental adaptability, their aggressive healing, their endurance capabilities, into combat advantages. Their bodies are literally designed to keep fighting when any reasonable species would quit. The final displays showed human performance data from various conflicts. They can fight in any gravity, adapt to any atmosphere with minimal protection, and survive conditions that would kill most species. But most importantly, they've maintained their drive to push boundaries even after achieving technological advancement. Most species become complacent once they develop technology to compensate for their biological limitations, Ixel observed. Humans use technology to push even further. They're not content with surviving, they want to master every environment they encounter. Kirax began his concluding notes. The galaxy's deadliest warriors aren't the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced. They're the ones who evolved on a planet that tried to kill them in countless ways, developed the ability to adapt to anything, and then turned that adaptability into both an art form and a combat doctrine. In essence, he finished, humans don't dominate despite their evolutionary history, they dominate because of it. Their planet didn't just make them strong, it made them unstoppable. The report would eventually be classified as essential reading for any species considering military engagement with humans. After all, how do you defeat an enemy whose entire evolutionary history is one long preparation for overcoming impossible odds? The final analysis. The Grand Galactic Assembly had never been so quiet. Representatives from 1,000 worlds sat in stunned silence as the final assessment committee presented their comprehensive analysis of humanity's position in the cosmic hierarchy of warfare. First speaker Lyra 11, a being of pure energy contained in an ancient crystalline matrix, addressed the assembly. Her form flickered with the gravity of the moment. For 10,000 cycles, we believed we understood warfare. We measured species by their natural weapons, their technological advancement, their tactical doctrines. Today, we admit we were wrong. Humanity has forced us to rewrite every principle of combat we thought we knew. The massive quantum display behind her came to life, showing footage from humanity's most notable military encounters. The Proxima Defense, the Europa Gambit, the Mars Rebellion, each battle demonstrating a different aspect of human combat superiority. Consider, Lyra continued, a species that turns their weaknesses into strengths. Their soft skin led them to develop advanced armor. Their limited strength pushed them to create force multipliers. Their vulnerability to injury drove them to perfect both healing arts and the ability to fight while damaged. War Minister Kalax of the Silicon Confederacy raised an appendage. But surely their psychological profile must make them unstable warriors. Quite the opposite, responded high psychologist Venn, rising from his gravity couch. Their psychological quirks are perhaps their greatest weapons. They don't just fight wars, they innovate during them. Each battle is an opportunity for creativity, each setback a challenge to overcome. The display showed human soldiers naming their weapons, decorating their armor, turning battlefield communications into entertainment channels. They maintain morale through something they call humor, Venn explained. They've weaponized their emotions in ways we're still struggling to understand. Supreme biologist Kirax's holographic form materialized next. Their evolutionary history is equally remarkable. Earth didn't just produce survivors, it created adaptable warriors who can fight effectively in any environment. They don't just endure harsh conditions, they actively seek them out for training. The assembly watched footage of humans conducting military exercises in environments that would kill most species. Desert warfare training, Arctic survival courses, underwater combat drills, each demonstrating humanity's incredible environmental adaptability. But perhaps most significantly, first speaker Lyra resumed, is their capacity for what they call improvisation. When we disable their advanced technology, they fight effectively with primitive tools. When we counter their strategies, they invent new ones. When we think we understand their capabilities, they reveal new ones. The display showed humans turning mining equipment into weapons, maintenance robots into combat drones, and civilian tools into military assets. They don't just adapt to situations, Lyra noted, they adapt the situations themselves to their advantage. War Minister Kalax's crystalline form dimmed with concern. Then what is the committee's recommendation regarding humanity's position in galactic affairs? First speaker Lyra's energy form pulsed with what might have been amusement. We recommend full integration into the Galactic Defense Coalition, not as subjects, but as equals. Perhaps even as leaders. The assembly erupted in shocked murmurs. Lyra waited for quiet before continuing. Consider the alternative. A species that treats combat as both an art form and a science. A species that becomes more dangerous when challenged, more creative when restricted, and more determined when defeated. A species that turns warfare itself into a form of entertainment and self-improvement. The final displays showed humanity's peaceful achievements alongside their military ones. Space exploration missions conducted with the same determination as military campaigns. Scientific breakthroughs approached with the same creativity as battlefield innovations. Diplomatic initiatives carried out with the same psychological insight as combat operations. Humanity's greatest weapon isn't their technology, their tactics, or even their adaptability, Lyra concluded. It's their unique combination of all these traits, bound together by what they call determination. They don't just want to survive, they want to excel. They don't just want to win, they want to win memorably. The assembly voted overwhelmingly to accept the committee's recommendation. As the session concluded, first speaker Lyra added one final note to the official record. Let it be known that humanity's position as the galaxy's deadliest warriors comes not from any single advantage, but from their ability to turn everything, even their disadvantages, into advantages. They are not just warriors, they are warfare artists, combat scientists, and battle philosophers all in one. And perhaps that is why they will always be the most formidable species in known space. The galaxy had finally understood, humanity's greatest strength wasn't any particular capability, it was their ability to turn any capability into a strength. And that, more than anything else, made them the undisputed masters of warfare in the known universe.